How do you roll dice in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition? You keep watching this video, that's how. First of all, why do we roll dice in Dungeons & Dragons? What does it do exactly? Well, as you may know, you build your character with a character sheet, which, do they come with a character sheet? Yeah, there you go. You got character sheet, the name, the stats, how good they are at all different things, the equipment they have, what class they are, which is sort of their play style and the like. And then you improv your character through the world. You and a bunch of other players, and also the DM, Dungeon Master, who's running the game. And you tell them what you want to do in the world they've created, but what you want to do may or may not actually succeed. You can't succeed every time, that's boring. We have to have a way to figure out how you fail at things. So, we roll dice to check to see if we fail. I was really hoping I would have grabbed the right one. No, that's the wrong one. This one is the one that matters most, the 20-sided die, or D20 as we call them. You can find them in a set like this, standard set of 7 polyhedral die at any gaming store or Amazon, whatever. We have a D4 or 4-sided die, D6, that one should be familiar. Up until now, you probably know them as just dice. The double pyramid, the one that looks like 2 D4s glued together, as you might imagine, that's a D8, an 8-sided die. Then we have 2 10-sided dice. One is a D10. The other one is, I guess, technically a D10. Really, you call it the percentile die. You roll both of these together, both of these 10-sided die together. One is the ones place, the other is the tens place, and that allows you to roll a result that's anywhere from 1 to 100 with just 2 dice. But this is not something you really do all that often. Most of the time you're rolling your D20, your 20-sided die. And the reason is that every side has an equal chance of coming up as all of the other side. And we use this balanced randomized element to roll, randomly generating a number, which we then combine with a number on our character sheet, which relates to how good we are at a thing. We got a bunch of skills here, like acrobatics, animal handling, medicine, nature, sleight of hand, and stealth. When you build your character during character creation, you would have made decisions which generate numbers, which you see here. These numbers are called modifiers because they literally modify your roll. Again, the wrong die. Where is it? There it is. That's close. Get used to that. Get used to grabbing the wrong dice. I did it all the time. Is this a D20? No, that's a D12. Oh, is this a D20? No, that's my D12. Is this a D20? That's 2 D10s! So you say you want your character to do a thing. I want to sneak past a guard. I want to stab someone. I want to pick a lock or whatever. And the GM will tell you what to roll if you don't know already. That's one thing to keep in mind. When in doubt, don't think of this, your character, as a character in a game, but a person in a world, or a character in a movie or story. What do you want them to do? Just say that. I want my character to do this. My character does that. Your GM, the person, the game master, or the DM, the dungeon master, whatever they insist on calling themselves, they know what to do next, and they'll tell you how to do it. But in general, it's your 20-sided die. Hey, I grabbed the right one this time. Your 20-sided die and a number on your character sheet. D20 plus modifier, and that tells you what happens. Now, in general, there are 3 different types of rolls you might do. You have your ability checks, which are right here, your skill section. That's where the bulk of your rolls come from, is rolling on one of those modifiers. There are some other instances where you roll an ability check on one of your main stats here, strength, dexterity, constitution, etc. These are your main mental and physical abilities. When you've built your character, there'll be a small number with a plus or minus next to it. In that case, that's what you add when you roll. But rarely do you roll on strength or on intelligence or something. Typically, you're gonna roll on one of your skills, one of these other numbers. A skill check, what they're more commonly called. But don't worry, those numbers, the strength, dexterity, and all that, your attributes, they actually matter. They've just been already added to your skills. The other 2 types we have are saving throws, which these basically represent your ability to resist a bad thing. And like your skills, they are tied to your 6 main attributes, strength, intellect, dexterity, etc. as well. So like dexterity might be to help you avoid a trap, or wisdom might help you resist some sort of spell, especially like a mental spell. If you're poisoned, your GM will probably have you roll a constitution saving throw to resist the poison or see how badly it affects you, or something like that. And this also goes for your attack checks, when you're trying to use the attack action to damage someone. And you can find the stats for that over here on your character sheet. On the left we have the weapon name, on the right we have damage, after you attack, if you hit, you might roll some damage, but let's not worry about that for now. And then in the middle, you have your attack bonus. This is the number that modifies your attack roll. Now, when you roll one of these checks, you're going for a higher number, as high a number as possible, because the GM, or Game Master, Dungeon Master, whatever, they're comparing this number to a number they have hidden called the difficulty class, or DC. Really, you don't need to know about that, but, some people like to know the inner workings, how the sausage is made, so to speak. Really, you roll a number, bigger number, gooderer, and he tells you what happens next. Or she. They tell you what happens next. That's a 1. That's a failure. That's a critical failure. That's another thing. I don't even know what's in the raw rules exactly, but critical failures and critical successes. If you roll a 20, a natural 20, where you have a 20 just on your die roll without a modifier being added on top of it, this means something cool happens. I think in the raw rules, it's not for every time you roll a check, only certain checks, but at our table, and I think a lot of tables, anytime you roll a natural 20, something good, something extra is gonna happen. It's up to your GM though. And the opposite is true, something bad happening if you roll a 1 on a check. Again, depending on what table you're at, who's running the game, that might not be the case. I'm not really sure what the actual rules are. I don't really care. It's more fun this way, so that's what we do. Now, what is in the rules is something called advantage. Advantage and disadvantage. So, this is an improv game, right? You're improvising, I do this, I do that. You may do things that may realistically help you, give you an advantage in some situation, or the opposite, have a disadvantage in a situation, which will make you more or less likely to succeed at whatever check it is you're doing. For example, if I'm in a tavern and there's a big fight going on, we got an orc right here with a sword and shield, and he's fighting this guy, this dwarven fighter. They're going toe to toe. And here's my character on the balcony. We got a little chandelier and a rope tied to it, or something. For some reason, there's a rope. He's gonna swing on the rope and then attack. There's nothing really in the rules for swinging on a rope and then attacking. There might be. But there's plenty of situations where there's nothing in the rules for it. It makes sense it should help you though, right? At least in this case, the GM decides, yes, it should help you. You're swinging on the rope, that's giving you momentum for your stabbing attack, so you get to roll advantage, or I get to roll advantage in my example, which means I get to roll 2 d20s. Natural 20! Sorry, it's a reflex. Anyway, the point is, you roll 2 dice and you take the highest. That's all. You have an advantage. GM decides there's some outside circumstances that make sense, would help you, so you get to roll 2 and take the highest. Now, disadvantage. What if you have a disadvantage? What if the GM decides, well, you're attacking from this side, the sun is actually in your eyes. You're going to have a disadvantage on attacking. So, because you have disadvantage, you're going to roll 2 dice and take the lowest. Now, what if you're in a situation where it makes sense to have an advantage, but also a disadvantage? Let's combine my 2 examples. Instead of being in a tavern, we're in a forest or a jungle or something. My guy, he's waiting on a tree limb next to a vine, and he's gonna swoop in and stab just like before, but also just like before in the other example, the sun is in his eyes, so he's gonna have an advantage and disadvantage. What do? Well, nothing, we just roll as normal, because if you have reason to have an advantage and also a disadvantage, they cancel each other out. And then you just roll 1 dice as you normally do. So if you ever have a disadvantage for whatever reason, maybe try to think some creative way to get an advantage, some abstract way of describing how you attack or something you do before you attack. Maybe the GM might decide you get advantage and that will cancel out the disadvantage, and you're less likely to fail at the thing. Now, what happens if you have multiple advantages or multiple disadvantages? That doesn't matter at all. If you have 1 advantage or 1,000 advantages, you still just grab 2 and take the highest. Another 20! Is this die broken? Why don't I use you more? And same with disadvantage. Whether you have 1 disadvantage or 1,000, you roll 2, you take the lowest. And if you have 1,000 advantages and 1 disadvantage, or 1,000 disadvantages and 1 advantage, it doesn't matter. They cancel each other out. Doesn't matter how it's weighed. As long as at least one exists on either side, they cancel out, and you roll as normal with 1 dice. That was my 3rd natural 20. That's not this. What are you? Why don't you do this when I play? Anyway, with advantage and disadvantage, it's important to keep in mind that it's a very kind of abstract, descriptive thing that's ultimately up to the GM. And like most rules decisions up to the GM, just kind of go with it. No sense in wasting time arguing too hard. Anyway, that should be enough to get you started with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and rolling of the dice.